Welcome back, friends, to another video where I'm looking at books. That's why I call it Looks at Books. It also rhymes, I'm told. I tell myself that to make me feel better. This is Right Here in River City, a portrait of Kansas City by Tracy Thomas and Walt Bodine, which is a name I haven't heard of or thought about in 30 freaking years. Previously, a Dewey Decimal System book from some library somewhere. This is a book that I came across when I was working at City Thrift. Anytime big boxes of books and stuff would come in, as when I was working as a donation attendant, I'd go through anything that looked interesting, I'd set it to the side, and I'd purchase it and take it home. So 2 years later, after having done that, I finally got around to reading this. So this is 1976. To Jet, Casey's Spartan Sage and Appreciation. Copyright 1976 by Tracy Thomas. First edition. Let's see who it was released by. No, Doubleday and Company Incorporated, Garden City, New York, 1976. So it's interesting because obviously this is many math numbers ago. 76, that's what, almost 50 years ago? Yeah, 49. And so I sat through reading this whole book, and it's like they're talking about Kansas City, but not like they're talking about Kansas City. Because by all the locations, the different parts of town, Northland, North Kansas City, South Kansas City, Overland Park, Lenexa, Johnson County, Independence, River Market, River Key, Westport Landing, and Raytown, whatever else. All that stuff's the same, but all the figures and the people and the whatever else about it's just kind of different, 78 things to do in River City, many of them free. It used to be said that Kansas City was a great place to live, but one wouldn't want to visit there. But the snotty humbug who said that went off to New York and soon died of smog inhalation. Little did he know that after he left, people discovered lots of reasons to visit Kansas City. In fact, for those who live here, it's possible to take an extended vacation, spending a few hours every weekend discovering all kinds of new and interesting sights and spots and people. The authors have selected some of these experiences based on the criterion of the six senses: sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, and the sixth sense, entertainment, which belongs not only to booking agents and travel guides, but to all people who have some spare time and an urge to experience different things. Except for the first five, which are five-star Kansas City musts. The remainder on the list are in no order whatsoever. Abject apologies are offered to all those places, things, and people events which are not listed. This chapter is not intended as a complete menu of what there is to do in Kansas City. Rather, it is an appetizer to whet people's appetites for self-discovery of the new, the exciting, the pleasing, the weird, the cosmopolitan, the homey, the funky, the solitary, the groupish, the thoughtful, and the beautiful, and most of all, the fun things to do here. From a chapter right here in River City. So, definitely an interesting book. Talks about the history of Kansas City, how it was founded, how Independence was almost going to be kind of the big hub of this area. But when they found kind of a Westport Landing area where they can just travel 14 miles further west on the river to a better spot to start dumping off their goods and all that, Kansas City kind of became more important than Independence. But it said a lot of interesting chapters. So how now Cowtown, Surprise City, River City, whole thing about Harry Truman, whole thing about how, downtown Kansas City and Johnson County are actually a real extremely rich area. We got a lot of 500 company CEOs and a lot of multimillionaires and all that kind of stuff. We got some really great jazz. We got a great football team, apparently. Baseball team, apparently. But again, this is 1976, so like I said, it's speaking of a different time and place, but still interesting because a lot of the names, a lot of things I remember. What's interesting, though, and I will say this, and I've told this to people that who've seen me reading this or I've been talking about it, I've lived in Kansas City since 1984. Born in Topeka, which is about an hour from where I'm at. And that's Kansas's capital city. I live in Kansas City. If people ask me, I say I live in Kansas City, because that's pretty much, if this is where I live, this is actually Kansas City. Let's say this is Kansas City, this is where I live. Pretty much all of this people say is Kansas City. There's, 40 different towns and townships and cities and small little whatevers that are all would say is Kansas City, We're all offshoots. It's all suburbs. But seriously, from where I am in Lenexa to drive all the way out to Liberty, you got it kind of crosses here. I'm crossing from Kansas into Missouri, but still all of this is Kansas City. Because really, if you look at it, if this was I-435, which is actually a loop that goes all around Kansas City, Pretty much everything within that is what we call Kansas City, even though there's all different little towns and stuff dotted all throughout. And it takes 1 hour and 10 minutes to go the entire loop. Technically, where I'm at is like right here. I used to work right here, and I used to work right here. And my friend John lives way over here. And fun stuff is right here. He used to live right here. But anyway, in the 44 years that I've lived in Lenexa, a suburb of Kansas, Greater Kansas City here in Johnson County, I don't think I've ever heard anybody refer to Kansas City as River City. It's called River City because you have like the Kaw River meets the Missouri River, and it's called the Great Muddy and all that. It's a river city, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody call it that. Nevertheless, some really great, interesting stories. Obviously, I like reading about all the jazz, the history of jazz here, because obviously Charlie Parker was from around here. Interesting chapter about the entertainment and all that, because they talk in like the different, what they call the emotional terrain, all the different kind of makeups of different ethnicities and whatever else. You know, all the communities, like the black communities in this area, the Spanish communities in this area, Italian communities in this area. There's a great story about how the Italian community back in 1970, whatever, when The Godfather came out, wasn't happy with the idea of that movie coming out. So they actually went to a downtown theater, bought out the entire showing of The Godfather, and then they all left, so nobody could actually watch it. Now that happened, I don't know if it was the Empire Theater at the time, because the same auditorium used to be like, oh my God, what was it called way back in the day? It was like an opera house, and then it was like the RKO Missouri, and then it was like a different Cineplex, and then it was this, and then it was, the Empire Theater, then it was shut down for years, then it was AMC, then it was Alamo, and then it was B&B. Anyway, it was, I don't know if it was an AMC or some sort of offshoot of it back in the 70s when that happened. But then sometime in the mid 2010s, when Alamo was there, the magazine that Alamo used to like support and like distribute did an article about The Godfather for like one of its anniversaries, I think. And how they tell that story about how a theater in Kansas City, the mobsters, they said the mobsters, but we actually know the story. It was just the Italian community supposedly bought out the entire theater so people couldn't see it. But they neglected to mention the fact that that location was actually now a modern day, at the time, Alamo Drafthouse. It just goes to show how, never mind, I was going to say something negative. Interesting book. Like I said, it's kind of like a time warp. Like I said, these cities, the places, and the areas, I know exactly where they are because I spent hours and hours and hours driving through and around and spending time. But like the faces and the names are, they're just different. So obviously, 50-year-old book, interesting stories. Probably only really relates to people here in the Kansas City area, but it's got some great, interesting tidbits about the history of Kansas City. So if you're into that, I suggest checking this one out. Definitely an interesting read. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was similar because I was reading this at the same time I was reading that Tomstown book. Well, Tomstown was more in-depth and on a grander scale. It was still kind of focused on the political machine in the early 1920s and 30s. And this is just more of a general overview of the entire history of Kansas City from the early 1900s to 1976. But definitely fun, interesting read. I think I have a couple more books on Kansas City that I'm going to go through and check out over the next couple months. I always had to do the same where I try and read 3 at a time. So now this one's done. I got to start a third one to go with the other 2 that I'm currently reading. Nevertheless, interesting read. Check it out. See you next time.